Welcome to Next Future Today with your host, Dan Keldsen. Find more episodes at nextfuturetoday.com on YouTube or in your favorite podcast app. This is Season 1, Episode 4, and this is for all of you who want to learn to be more creative, dive deep into both original and remixed content, and a whole lot more. This fun chat is with Kirby Ferguson, whose most famous online work is the multi-part, and currently being updated and re-released series, Everything is a Remix. We talk about the process of creativity, some of the tools that Kirby uses to jumpstart creativity, the sheer volume of work that goes into creating a fast-cut documentary like Everything is a Remix and This is Not a Conspiracy Theory. And to follow Kirby's work, find him at KirbyFerguson.com. Everything is a remix.info. This is not a conspiracy theory.com. And anywhere memes are getting discussed, torn apart, and remixed into an infinity of memes. Let's dive on into it.
So, Kirby, it's so good to meet you. I'd heard about you through your Everything is a Remix work. I found you through a connection I don't know terribly well, but the guy who wrote this book, Ramon Julians. This is, what's that?
I know him, yes, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I haven't seen I haven't gotten his latest book, but this is the previous book, and sort of definitely flies into the space of your Everything is a Remix idea. I definitely want to talk about Everything is a Remix. I'm interested as a musician myself, as a cultural phenomenon, because it's certainly done lots of things to stir up innovation in the world at large that's not just tied to business or something that's maybe a little more boring for people. And also for me, and that's the reason why that I stumbled onto Ramon, is I've done a lot of innovation work, and I often tell people that one of my, I don't know if it's a superpower, but it's certainly a hell of a shortcut. I see solutions from other spaces that I can take out, rethink slightly, and stick them into a new solution, and remix it, essentially. And what do you know? I can get an innovation to market or through the system or whatever much faster by taking that approach. And some people think that's cheating. They can... That's their problem. For me, for my clients, the teams that I work with, it does tremendously good things. So I thought that might be an interesting angle that we could talk about. And I think that your background as a documentarian and I'm sure lots of other things that I don't know yet, I think that could really help the audience that I'm going for.
Sounds great.
So let's talk about Everything is a Remix. I was watching, I've been consuming, you may have seen me on your various sites in the last 24 to 48 hours, buying all sorts of stuff from you. I've read a bunch of your worksheets, which I hopefully will get to talk to as well.
Awesome.
But so let's start with what really sort of made you famous, which is that Everything is a Remix. How did you get started in wanting to do that project? And I forget, it took you 2 years or 4 years? There was some multiple of 4 between that and the conspiracy theory.
Oh, between them? The Everything is Remix project, from the launch of the first installment to the last, took a couple of years. And then I took a very long time working on the next project.
Right. So how did you start on Everything is a Remix?
I started it, I was doing a variety of things. My background was in graphic design. So I worked in the advertising sphere and publishing sphere a lot. And then ultimately I transitioned over to video because desktop video had hit a little before, and I was like, oh, okay, this is the new thing. I'm going to try this out. Just did it for fun.
Sure.
I started making comedy videos. I wasn't real serious about it, but I got better at it. I had an interest in it. It was my hobby. I got better at it, and then eventually I got a job in video production for a marketing company. And then it was around then that I got the idea for Everything is a Remix, and I started it. I worked on it. I remember during evenings on that job, I would edit the video. I would stay at the office and just work on the video for a bit longer. So I released it while I was working as a video producer at a marketing company. And like right away, you know, I knew it had a lot of potential, even though looking back on it, it didn't like set the world on fire immediately, but it popped. It, like people were really interested in it. People were really excited about it. People were sending me donations, which I just said, I just put up my PayPal or whatever and said, hey, you know, if you like it and you want to send a donation, feel free. And people actually did it, you know, which was unheard of to me at the time. Keep in mind, this was over 10 years ago.
Right, yes.
So, yeah, so it just, like right away, there were sparks when I put it out there, right? Like it wasn't hugely viral immediately. It ultimately did go viral, but it just popped when I put it out. And I was like, whoa, that's quite a reaction. And then after I put the second one out, I think I quit the job and started working on that project exclusively. And then I've managed to keep doing it ever since. Not working on that.
Right, yeah.
I've managed to be a freelance video producer since then.
Right. Yeah. So you're kind of early in the sort of content creator realm. You know, I mean, you know, yeah. I mean, you know, there's been some famous YouTubers and there's streamers and whatnot. But not. I guess you're the Everything is Remix is more of it's a documentary and it's more of a, I guess it's more thoughtful is what I'm struggling to get to than a lot of content that you'd find on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, I was trying, like, that's I'm a middle-aged person, so my background was documentaries and films and newspapers and magazines and books, right? So I came out of that sort of culture. I didn't emerge out of the culture of YouTube. I was never big on YouTube. I wouldn't say that I'm big on YouTube now. It initially broke on a site called Vimeo, which was sort of like it's not really a place that people use for posting videos so much anymore. It's like a professional sort of portfolio site now. But then it was sort of like the upscale, like hipster YouTube or whatever, right? And that's where I broke, and I got like 1 million subscribers on Vimeo, and that's where it went viral. So I came from a different sort of cultural niche than YouTubers do. More of an old media sort of mentality.
Right. So I guess. Maybe because I was consuming so much of your stuff in a relatively short time frame, I didn't catch all of your background. But you studied English literature, I think, in university?
Yeah, I was an English major. And I think when I realized I was interested in media was I started working on a student newspaper in university, and I was much more into that than I was into going to class. And I started designing that newspaper just because the paper looked terrible, and I didn't have an interest in that. It was just, this is really bad. I can make it better than that, and that's how it started. That's how I got into graphic design. Was just there's a need here. I'm going to take a swing at this. And that was sort of what started me on my. So it wasn't until university really. Like I was always writing before then and a creative person, but it didn't have an outlet per se until university probably. And it was when I started working on the student newspaper that I realized and in particular I realized that like the combination of writing and how you present it was interesting to me. So that's been the theme of my work, is that it's not just when you detach the writing from the expression, from like it being part of a visual layout or a video or whatever, I don't find that as engaging. It's the combination of medias that I find exciting, and that's how I ended up ultimately settling in video, I think, because it's everything all at once. Writing, it's music, it's video, it's visuals, it's graphics,
it seems
it's everything.
Yeah, so and it does seem like a lot. So for both of the series that I'm familiar with, Everything is Remix and This Is Not a Conspiracy Theory. There's a lot packed in there. And is it literally just you, or did you farm any of the work out to?
I've had help.
It's pull it together.
I would say it's mostly me for sure. But
Okay.
I had significant help on Everything's Remix with, actually on both of them. There were people who contributed motion graphics and Photoshop work and various, and music. There was lots of music that got produced for This Is Not a Conspiracy Theory, but the bulk of the work, most of it,
Okay.
is me.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think what so part of what through Next Future Today, and because I have two businesses that are involved in video, there's still, the entire world got thrown into Zoom. It's a verb now. It's just like Xerox became the verb for copy machines. They didn't necessarily go willingly, and they didn't have the skills for the most part, right? So all of a sudden, you're not going to work anymore. You're showing up on camera, and you're going to be talking to your remote peers, and you're going to look just like everybody else who also didn't know what was going on. They had no prep whatsoever. So on the one hand, it's worth doing something to level up, in my opinion, if you want to be seen as more professional, if you want to be more comfortable, if you want to get some skills that probably have a long life now, because we've proven that life online is a real thing between the internet in general being around for this long and the rise of video going just bonkers, right, in the last 2 years. So I'm always trying to find what's one thing, or what's like a first step down the path that might help people get comfortable in using video as a way to get whatever their message is out to the world. So it's if we were to, and we'll hit this from a couple of different angles, I think, but if you were to say to somebody who's like, okay, you're resigned to the fact that as a remote worker, if you work for somebody else, you're going to be talking to your colleagues over over Zoom or whatever you happen to be using, or making pitches to clients. There's lots of different situations. Are there any barriers that you've seen that you had to conquer to get comfortable with video, or was it how did you get comfortable with video? You sort of came at it from English and literature and newspapers, and then design, and then sort of just the next iteration?
Yeah, I mean, it took a long time. Like, to get comfortable on camera, it took me quite a while. But again, I think younger people may have advantages there because you're growing up with cameras and stuff. Like, it was very new and different to me, right, when I started appearing on camera.
Right.
So I would say, but I do think that most people, they can't perform very well on camera, right? Like, I tend to think that's more, like, obviously, like, I don't care that much about how I'm lit or whatever on camera. So it's not my interest. I personally don't care for this sort of thing, or it's not my, I do set up lit shots for the videos and stuff, but generally speaking, it's not something
Sure.
prioritized because it's just not important for me. So to me, what I think is important is, like, definitely one thing I would say, audio is important. Your audio has to be good. You have to have a laptop with a good mic, or you have to have a decent microphone or whatever, because if people can't hear you, that's a real problem. People can't see you that great. That's not such a big deal. But I tend to think, like, how you tell stories, how you speak, how you come across, how you project through video. That's the most important thing. And, like, I've done improv classes, I've done some acting, I'm a seasoned amateur at a lot of different things. So,
Sure.
like, I think all of those are good. Like, the improv, I think, is great for regular people to get comfortable with riding the wave of, like, whatever happens on camera, right? Just saying yes to everything. That's
Right.
a big thing in improv, is you say, when somebody says,
Yeah.
whatever, you say yes to it. You don't go, yeah, I don't know, or no. You say yes. You go,
Yeah. Yes, and
yeah. So definitely, like, at public speaking, I think is something that can help people a lot. Scares the hell out of almost everybody. Scared the hell out of me. It's definitely very intimidating, and that makes being on camera seem like not that big a deal, right? Even though it is a bigger deal, really. Like, when you're on camera, when I go on camera, I'm getting seen by thousands of people, whereas when you go on stage, you get seen by maybe a few hundred people, or it could be 50 people or 30 people or whatever, but that feels scarier to most human beings. It's just a weird scenario to end up in. So I would say, like, all those sorts of real life things help, and just being, just trying to do better. Just assess your performance, try to improve it. Don't be impatient or cruel with yourself. Like, accept that you don't have to be great at it. That's if you're not great at it, that's fine. Just try to get a little bit better for tomorrow and the week after that, and keep doing that, and then you'll be surprised where you end up in a year, right?
Right. Yeah, I think actually, so part of your, some of the resources that you have, so like getting unstuck and autofocus, and then the 4 steps to getting an idea. I was sort of surprised and heartened that you talk a lot about, you don't call them iterations, but you say, go back to step 3 and try again. Like with a colleague, you're trying to figure out, does this idea matter?
Yeah.
Don't take your own word for it. So go talk to somebody else, see what they think, and learn from that.
Yeah, and that's something.
Yeah, so that seems baked in.
Yeah, and that's something that I think for most people is not easy. Like, I think for most people, the thing that you make it's just you, like it's some sort of depiction of yourself. And we tend to defend, just like you defend your own little ego, you defend your little creations, right? And that's a hump that you have to get over, right? Like, it's not you. Like, it's just a thing that you made. And you do want to be passionate about the thing that you create, but you need to create some sort of buffer between you and it, some sort of distancing to where you can be objective about it. And that helps, like getting different perspectives from different people, and, definitely get good people. Like, there are people who, without even meaning to, they will sort of knock you down a peg, like they're being too aggressive or critical or whatever about it. They don't, in Western culture, I find in particular, there's a big instinct towards criticizing and sort of demeaning what other people are doing, right? Like, it's just a thing that's in the culture. Sure. It's a thing that we do. And working with people like that can be a drag. Like, generally speaking, what you want from someone who is a collaborator is to just look at the thing, or partner or whatever, to look at the thing and accept it for what it is and think, okay, like, how can we make this thing better? Like, this is what it is, and how can we make it better? Whereas I think a lot of kind of critically minded people look at the thing and think, I don't like this thing, and why can't it be the thing that I want it to be? And lots of these people who have these opinions, they're not people who make stuff. Like, I think a lot of them are kind of resentful on some level. Like, why isn't this me doing this? Well, because you're not doing it. That's fine. Like, so I think working with people who accept your thing for what it is and are just like, how can I help you make this thing better? That's the mindset that you should be looking for in other people that you're partnering with. And when you collaborate with other people, I think that's what you want to bring to it. You don't want to have the attitude of like, I don't like it. It's not what I would do. It's not what I want. Just like, this is what it is.
Right.
And how can I help you?
Right. Well, I think there's different layers too of, what kind of a read or take do you want on what you're doing? So, if it's early on in the process, you don't need to criticize my use of an Oxford comma or not.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe you do if you're really hung up on it.
Yeah, and for that sort of stuff, I tend to think, like, just hire an editor. Like, for grammar and punctuation, like, if you're not great at that, like, just hire somebody, just get a professional to help you out with that. I wouldn't get friends for that sort of thing. So that's the sort of feedback that I would consider to be not that useful for me. If it's it's sort of granular, fine tooth stuff like that, I personally would not find that useful.
Sure. Right. Yeah. Well, so, tying it to you're getting unstuck in the 4 steps of getting an idea. So it's, I like one of your ideas, which I'm sure is potentially controversial, which is to walk away. Yeah. Absolutely. So if you feel like you're stuck, right? So walk away, which, is sometimes hard to, like, there's it's probably worse now in the last 2 years, the whole hustle, grind it out culture, where if you're not working, 1,000 hours a week and on your passion product, projects all the time, then you're human scum, right? You should be eliminated from the planet or something. And that's not necessarily, that might work for some people, right? But to force that as an attitude on everybody seems kind of counterproductive. So I like that you not only do you say walk away, but here's why, and here's the things that you should do when you have walked away,
Yeah.
which I thought was a really interesting, thoughtful approach. So and you said you've been using this kind of technique for 10 or 20 years or something. How did you get into that sort of mindset?
I forget where I got it, but it's pretty well known. Like, there's lots of people who talk about the phenomenon of they have ideas when they're on a walk or they're in the shower or whatever, right? Like they're off doing their thing, and that's what it stems from. It's this insight that lots of different creative people have had, that when you unplug and just go fishing or do whatever the thing that you do is, that's when solutions to problems can come up. It's a well-known thing that happens to lots of people, so it's certainly not my idea.
Right.
But to be clear, what I'm saying with the walk away, I'm not saying, I do think there's a point where, especially when you're starting out, there is a time to just pull the plug, like this isn't working. And the best thing to do is just start over, because when not everything is solvable that you start when you're a young creator or a beginner. Like sometimes it's just broken, like it's not working. It's
right.
not and the best thing you can do is just start over. But for people who have a bit more experience, I tend to think that a useful technique is to just leave it for a bit, leave it for a while, leave it for however long you can. And if it's 24 hours, then leave it for 24 hours. I realize that people have deadlines and, there are constraints on what is possible.
Sure.
So you do what is possible. But if you can leave it, I have personally found if you can leave something for a month or more, like if it's your own project, that works so well. And when you come back to it and look at it again, you kind of look at it like an outsider, right? Like you'll have a very fresh take on the material. So it's just walking away for a while, for whatever sort of period you can manage, and you can be the judge on how long that should be. It's just a well-known technique, because your subconscious mind is chugging away on the problem while you think you're doing other stuff. You're dreaming about it, and your unconscious mind is sorting out the problem, and then when you return to it, all this stuff kind of bubbles up.
Right.
Or it can pop up when you're off doing your thing, when you're off running or playing with your kids or doing whatever it is that you do. Boom, the idea can hit you right there, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. In the unlikely circumstances that you couldn't have planned for.
Yes.
I think one of the techniques you talk about is getting like super immersed in a topic, so that you're kind of overly full.
Yep.
And you probably remember the commercials of the hand soap. You're soaking in it.
Yeah.
From like the 70s or 80s.
I am old enough to remember that. Palmolive.
You're the right age.
Palmolive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the first time anybody's got my reference, by the way. So I've been using it for 10 years.
That's how freaking old we are. Okay.
Gen X.
Yeah.
So it's. I mean, I agree with that. That's what I agree with it, partly because that's what I tend to do. Like if I showed you, I made a mind map of the kinds of things that I wanted to talk to you about and that I want to be able to refer to afterwards. It looks a lot like a conspiracy theory map, by the way, which is
a crazy wall.
Probably just a coincidence.
Yeah.
But it's like for me, I like to immerse myself, kind of not necessarily always directly in a target space, but in sort of related things, because I'm interested in how things cross-pollinate.
Fantastic.
And but that, any way you slice it, how are you going to be able to know enough to have an opinion or a unique story to tell or whatever if you don't have enough material to pull together and probably to remix into it, so then it gives people hooks.
Yes.
So that they can, you're referencing some famous piece of literature. My youngest daughter right now is all about William Shakespeare and all sorts of other fun stuff. Yeah. And I read some of that. It was a long time ago, right? Sure. Mm-hmm. But the more examples that we have, then we can find some connecting points. So I think is there any sort of what I've seen of your pieces, they're pretty damn well researched. There's a lot of material in there, like with my level of skills for video editing, I would have died putting together the first 2 minutes of any one of your pieces, because it's so much.
It took some work. Yeah.
So how do you even frame that out to so if we talk about storytelling, how do you get to the point where do you create sort of a broad arc on your story and then you start diving into specific pieces to flesh out mini stories, or how do you think through the process?
So I would say that like you definitely made a good point with like, you don't want to just stay in the box of your interests, right? You do want to have influences from outside fields. This is another like well-known thing in innovation, cross-pollination, like you said. Like you want to, innovations come often from other fields. Like the printing press was kind of cobbled together from food making technologies and older printing techniques and stuff. So the elements were sort of sitting there for centuries, right? Like anybody could have put them together, but nobody had encountered those elements. So staying diverse in your interests is definitely a good thing. At the same time, you need to be pretty saturated in your field, right? Like if you're working in tech, you better be you better know what's going on in tech, right? Like you better be up to your eyeballs in tech stuff. So I think of it as you want whatever the field is that you're in. You need a lot. You need to fill a lot of your cup with that stuff, and then on top of that, you need to and then on top of that, you have disparate, diverse interests that can potentially influence and where you can find unlikely combinations. Because if you limit yourself to just the field that you're in, the solutions you come up with are going to be very similar to what the solutions other people are coming up with, right? Because creativity and ideas, it's about connecting things. It's about combining things often, right? So you have to find unusual things that you can connect and combine. So the way that I tend to do things, I'm a big note taker. Like I'm frequently clipping things that I find. I'm a big highlighter in books. In my Kindle, I like to highlight passages that are important for me. So I'm sort of building this. Neil Gaiman called it a compost heap. Like you're piling all this stuff together, and then your ideas are growing out of it, right? I think that's a good way to look at it. You do want to be, and you don't want to go crazy with it. Like you can't just be throwing stuff on the pile and trying to cheat, right? Like it's got to be things that actually are meaningful to you. You don't just want to make a big pile because then you're not. None of it's.
Then you're a hoarder, and cops will get called or something.
So I collect highlights, I collect notes, I collect things from around the web. I make notes of my own thoughts. And eventually sort of themes will emerge out of that stuff that I collect. And then it's about forming groups, right? It's about clustering things together. And that was how Everything Is a Remix started. Like I had the bits of like Star Wars and Led Zeppelin and the Mac. What I initially had was just, by the way, for anybody who hasn't seen it, those are all artists and creators that copied a lot of stuff. Like, and you can see the copying in their work. They copied quite a bit. So what I initially started with there was just like, hey, here's these interesting stories about. I didn't even know that I wasn't looking to find examples of that. The examples all just popped up as things that I don't know I was interested in somehow. So. So these things sort of popped up independently, and then I realized, I can turn these into one story. And for me, that's what happens a lot. Is like in your various searchings and stuff, you find themes, and then you group them together, and then that can become something, right? So that's the 2,000-foot view of what I do. It's about compiling stuff, finding themes in it, creating groups. And wasting a lot of stuff. Like, I think that's important too. Like, like a lot of it just never goes anywhere. It just gets filed away, and I never touch it again. But it's sort of like comedians know that. Comic writers know that like 1 in 10 jokes works or something like that. That's if you're good and you're a professional. Probably it's 1 in 10. So it's a small minority of your stuff that actually is worthwhile exploring. Farther, and I would say it's a lot less than 1 in 10 for me. Like it's a tiny little sliver of what you get up to. So there's lots of stuff that there's lots of waste that gets produced along the way, and that is totally fine. If you're not doing that, I would say you're not doing it right. Like if you're trying to use the bulk of what you're doing, like that's definitely not the right approach.
Right. Yeah, I think it's. It took me a long time to realize that. Like I would take editors' comments very personally.
Yeah, there you go.
What do you mean you don't understand my idea? Are you an idiot?
Totally. I think that's most people. Yeah.
Yeah, and I thankfully at some point, I don't remember when it was, but I realized, part of my issue is that it can be hard to determine what's good and what's
Yes.
not so good or what's outright terrible.
Yeah.
Because it all sort of seems the same in a lot of ways.
People talk about that, like people, like songwriters and stuff talk about that. Like I had no idea that whatever song was going to be a hit. I wrote it in an hour and just threw it together, and then people loved it. Like you don't know. It's hard to know what's going to work, right?
Yeah.
And
well, you had sort of
you might not seem good to that many people, right? And what seems bad to you, other people might like it.
Yeah. In one of your processes, you take it as that's for me, it's sort of a variation on "murder your darlings" as a common phrase for writing, which is unbelievably gruesome and all, but it's also very effective.
Yeah.
But take an idea that you love, that you think, well, that this is the core of whatever the project happens to be, and throw it away like it really doesn't matter, and does it?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I forget if that's in my worksheets or not, but that's definitely something that I picked that up from, I think it was the songwriter Tom Lewis that I heard it from.
Okay.
Something that he does when he's stuck on a song is he removes the part that he loves, because sometimes that bit that you love is no longer serving the whole, right, and it's actually holding you back and getting in the way. But you love it, so you're just trying to cram it in there and make everything work around it, but it actually is not working anymore. So I have a system where I call it odds, where in all my in anything that I produce, I have this folder or this document or whatever, and it's called odds. And things that don't quite fit, I plop them in there, and sometimes they'll come back out of there. But it's really great to have some, not trash bin, but something between a trash bin and your main document, where you can just plop things that you're not sure if they're working or not. And then if you need them, hit the floor. It's like throwing papers on the floor or whatever. And if you want it back, you can just pick it up and put it back into the draft. But I really like that. You need to be free with pulling things out and setting them aside and not worrying that they're going to get lost, right? So that's something that I really like about that odd system, where it's, and anything that I need, it's still there. Anything that I remember later, that actually I do like that, then it's right there and I've still got it.
Right. And so do you physically organize the materials, or is it electronic or some sort of hybrid?
Nowadays I'm using a program called Obsidian. Have you heard of Obsidian?
No.
Yeah, Obsidian is a really cool, it's free. It's a totally free program for now, and there's like extra stuff that you can pay for. But Obsidian, basically, I think like people of our generation would call it a wiki. It lets you create basically a wiki, your own kind of personal wiki, but it's really quick and easy to use on like an actual wiki. So I used to use a program called Scrivener, which is better known. Scrivener's great. You can absolutely use Scrivener. It's awesome. So I used that for many years. It's fantastic. I could use it again. I totally recommend it. But for now, I'm using a program called Obsidian, which lets you be a little bit more fluid in what you're doing. So you're basically kind of creating this interconnected document that's a bit like a miniature website. And it just lets you link together things in a very fluid sort of way that's better than the folder approach of a Scrivener or whatever. So I personally right now I'm using a program called Obsidian.
Okay. That's fascinating. It's are you familiar with Notion at all?
Obsidian, I would say, is comparable to Notion. You could use Notion. I'm sure you could do the same sort of workflow in Notion. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's funny. So you're the only person who's got my Palmolive reference, and that's the first time I've heard wiki in probably 5 to 10 years.
But you know what though? Everybody knows what a wiki is, though. Even if you don't, even if you think you don't, you do. You've used Wikipedia. You know what a wiki is. So, I mean,
right.
but like that. It's different than a wiki too, though. But like for people who are a little older and do know the history of the internet a bit, I would say it is the most comparable to a wiki. But wikis are famously super clunky to use, whereas Obsidian is very, very fast. It's super, super fast to use.
Okay. Cool. Well, yeah, I just looked it up. That
yeah, it's free. It's free to try out.
Looks slick. The mapping between things. That's always fun. I'm a big fan of visualizations.
Yes.
Especially for large collections of stuff. How else? I mean, I can see connections between lots of things, but it's even better if something helps me to see.
It's great at that. It has a graph view, a network view, where you can see all your documents as nodes in a network. And then you can see like, oh, are there things that aren't connected to anything that's possible? Those are junk or whatever, or maybe those are interesting. Who knows, you know? And it lets you see where things are clustering. Super cool.
Yeah, awesome, cool. So learn multiple things today.
That's great.
So, and it was in. So you say remove your favorite part in the getting unstuck document template toolkit. Worksheet is what you call it. Yeah. So it's I love how it's so like I've this is going to sound maybe idiotic, but so sometimes I get called a futurist, right? Because I tend to be looking into the future, and there's plenty of negative. It's not. Sometimes that's not exactly an endearing term. It's not meant to be a nice term. Like some futurists have their heads stuck not in the clouds. They have them stuck somewhere else. But so I one of my differentiators, I hope, is that I like to think of myself as a pragmatic futurist. So part of my world is being a guide of sorts to say, hey, this thing seems like it's important. I'm going to go deeper than most normal human beings would go in whatever the topic is. But when I resurface, I'm hoping to show you a shortcut to why this matters and how to get there. And even though I swore that I would never go into teaching because both my parents and my stepmother were all teachers, and it didn't pay nearly well enough, somehow I found myself in the position of teaching others. I found a way to get paid at it, so yay! But I think what's interesting is that if we like talking about creativity as a process, essentially, what you've done with your worksheets, they're remarkably simple. I love how they're sort of just simple. No need to dress things up, and just like things like. So I hate project management personally. And you say in this one, in the getting unstuck, how large and complex is this project? Mini, small, medium, large, jumbo. And then what's the timeline? It's just you break things down into nice little nuggets. So it's not like if you've ever tried to read like the PMP book, the Pinbach. I'd rather die. So something like this. It says it's a nice nudge in the right direction. Great. And that's which you can quote me on this if it's useful. It feels sort of like Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art.
Sure. Yes. Because
it's not overblown. It's not you're not trying to deliver like the Bible on how to be creative, how to be a creative genius. It's here's some things, try it, move on with your life. But maybe this helps put some boundaries around things.
Yes. Well, I mean, something that I wanted to like. I wanted to make something that's for everybody. Like if you own a restaurant or a bakery or you have a native business or whatever, like you still need to innovate. Like everybody needs to innovate. Everybody needs to differentiate themselves from the competition nowadays. So there's lots of different. I want everybody to be able to use it, and I do think of it as on the scale of like an individual or a small team. I guess that's my experience, and that's where I'm coming from, right? So Project management tends to be
Right.
for larger teams. So
Yeah.
I generally try to keep things pretty simple for folks. But that's so cool.
Right.
I'm happy to hear those are still new. We only launched those like a month ago, so it's awesome to hear people
Oh,
actually
okay.
that directly from somebody using them. Yeah, they're only a month old. They're only a few weeks old, maybe.
Okay. Yeah. Well, there you go.
That's awesome.
Hot off the presses, so to
Yeah.
speak. And I did actually, as you can see, I did print them off because I'm old.
Yes. I'll tell you what. For the young
Well, that-
kids, for anybody young listening, a printer is a good thing to have. In particular, get a laser printer because inkjets break very quickly, so you should get a laser printer. But like paper is
Yeah.
tough technology to beat, man. It is so easy and fast, and it lets you put things, populate your physical space with like little notes, and you like. Our minds are very, very geared towards the physical world, right? Like when something just lives in your laptop, that's an abstraction, and it's hard to like keep it straight in your head. When you can put papers out in the world, it's easier to like you can remember where things are better. Like I don't know if you have this problem, but just remembering where a piece of information was getting really hard, right? Like was it a text message? Was it an email? Was it a tweet? Was it on LinkedIn? Like
Yeah.
where I talked to you, like. These things are just scattered to the four winds, you know, they're all over the place, right? So
Right.
paper is a really great way to work. It's a great way to change context rather than like looking at your freaking phone all day or your computer. You print out the document, and it's something that, again, it gives you sort of a fresh perspective. And then you can go outside and go to the park and sit at a picnic table and write up notes on your document or whatever. And
Right.
it can really help to like open up the process and relax you and let you play. You know, I think that's what creativity is, right? It's play. You're in a relaxed state where you're not really tight and anxious. You know, there's a lot of anxiety that can go with creativity, but I think you've got to keep things loose and be playful. So I'm a strong for anybody out there who's like, oh, paper, like, well, who needs paper and who needs a printer? They are really good tools to have.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of crazy. I mean, you know, a cheap laser printer can be like less than the cost of one ink cartridge for an inkjet printer.
They're totally worth it.
And you could potentially throw away the entire printer for less money and just buy another one.
Totally worth it.
Which is
Get the
horrifying.
Laser printer. People don't get the inkjet, get the laser printer. And I have
Yeah,
the one
exactly.
I don't know how old it is. It's 7 years old or whatever. They last a really long time.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's yeah, and then if you just buy in, 2 or 3 packs for toner cartridges, then you're all set.
Yep.
Buy a whole box of paper.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So before we run out of time, so I did want to. I'm going to peel your brain apart just a little bit. It won't hurt, probably. On the storytelling front, so for people who are, there's all sorts of advice that, storytelling, to be a good salesperson, you have to be able to tell a story. To raise money, as from VCs and whatnot, you got to be able to be good on news show,
Yeah.
Okay, great. I need to be great at storytelling. How the hell do I do that? Where do you get, if you don't feel like you have some inborn talent, is there anything that you learned from that got you on the right path, or things not to do? I don't know.
I mean, personally, I think it's just about the critically viewing stories. I think it's as simple as that. Like, I think if you want to be a good storyteller, you have to be curious about stories and interested in stories, and watching them with some sort of critical acumen. Like you're not just sort of passively consuming it. You're noticing the construction. You're noticing the techniques that they're using, like making notes of like, oh, I liked it when they did this, whatever. Technique.
Yep.
So I think just like writers have to be readers, writers have to be good readers. They have to be really attentive readers. I think storytellers have to be attentive story consumers. So I personally think that's the main thing. Like, again, it's sort of a remixy view, like the stuff that you consume, like you end up sort of channeling it out into your own work. So whatever the storytelling is that you like, you kind of do your version of that sort of storytelling. And I think, again, it can be cool to cross mediums too. Like if you're a podcaster and you're really into TV shows or whatever, or you're a writer but you're really into movies or whatever, like if you can cross the, like sort of bring techniques from different fields, that's potentially interesting as well. Whereas if you're a podcaster and you're listening to lots of podcasts, you're going to end up sounding like a podcaster, you know, like that's what your storytelling is. Very podcast style. So having diverse interests in different sorts of stories from different mediums is definitely important as well. But I personally think it's as simple as that. It's just getting engaged with stories and pulling them apart, making notes about like how does it work, how's it structured, and a lot of it you'll just do instinctively, I think, like just by consuming interesting stuff and thinking of it in a critical sort of way where you are retaining things that you liked about it. You'll just start to like flow into the things that you do. You won't have to be technically crafting it, you know, like it'll just sort of, it'll be art, it'll just flow through you at a certain point.
You don't have to pretend to be the next Walt Disney or something like that.
No, yeah, I mean, I think like there's a lot to be said for simplicity too, right? Like I'm a big believer in simplicity, and if for people who like simple stories and want to tell simple stories, like I'm all for that. Like that's a really important thing. I think a lot of storytellers are too clever. I'm probably guilty of that. Like being unpretentious and simple in your storytelling is a completely 100% valid way to tell stories. And I think some people feel like, oh, it's got to be elevated somehow, and it doesn't. Like there's nothing wrong with a simple story. Simple stories are mostly long.
Right. Okay. Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, just, you know, again, like looking at what am I? I'm like 15 minutes into This Is Not a Conspiracy Theory, and it's already been so chock full of things.
Yeah, it's a lot.
And like, how the hell does he keep track of where this is all going? But you know, I mean, it's very. Readers or viewers or the audience are always going to consume things in a different way than the creators did, right? Exactly. You know, it's like, you know, people that insist that Moby Dick meant a certain thing, and if you ask the author, no,
sure.
Definitely not. Yeah. And actually, it's not supposed to be Ishmael; it's supposed to be Bob.
Yeah, right.
But you know. So cool. So I wanted to wrap up, let people know. So some of the places they can find you are KirbyFerguson.com. You got Remix Everything on.
Yeah, I would say the main place is everythingisaremix.info. If you just search for everything, I know that nobody uses .info. Okay. But if you just search for everything is a remix, that's sort of the main hub. My other that's just sort of my personal site, the KirbyFerguson.com. But Everything is Remixed is my main project. That project, I launched it. It did awesome 10 years ago, and people have just been interested in it ever since then. It never goes away. It always, like, people are always watching it. People are always talking about it. So instead of just doing some sort of minor update on it, which I've done in the past, I just decided I'm just going to reboot this and just do this all over again. So that's what I'm engaged in now.
Right.
So Everything is Remixed is live again, and I finished a documentary a year or two ago called This Is Not a Conspiracy Theory, which is about America's history with conspiracy theories. If anything, it's probably more relevant now than when I finished it. So those are my two major projects. Everything is Remixed is the current one. This Is Not a Conspiracy Theory is the previous one.
Yeah, so I mean, when I found you through God, what's his name? Ramon. And that was the first time that I'd seen Everything as a Remix, and I was like, really? Oh my God. I think my words to you in LinkedIn were, holy shit, what a great job you did with this work.
You just found it out. That's awesome. Most people know it from back in the day.
Yeah, you know, I mean, it's all, I have lots of diverse interests, but apparently I did not, I don't know why I wouldn't have stumbled onto that, because that was around the time when I saw that we have some mutual connections, like Andrew Keene, who wrote Cult of the Amateur, which at the time I thought he was just an arrogant asshole, like a lot of people did at the time.
Yeah.
And now I think he was very right, and I need to reach out to him and apologize. But so between that and Rob Salkovitz, who I met through similar circumstances, I was covering Enterprise 2.0 with sort of like Enterprise wikis, and all. I was one of the first people that talked about that in the sort of analyst world.
Okay.
And I met Rob through that, and now he's all about Generation Blend and Comic-Con and pop culture. So I don't know how I didn't. What's that?
I know Rob as well.
Yeah. So I saw on LinkedIn that we're mutually connected with those two folks.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And it's and there's some clear ties to there's reasons why we would all be connected like that, but it's interesting because like Rob, when I first met him, he was coming from an enterprise standpoint and doing a lot of work with like Microsoft and things, and then next thing I knew, he was talking about Comic-Cons and fandoms and all sorts of things. Like, wow, where did that come from? Yeah. But thank God for LinkedIn.
He saw opportunity. He was ahead of the curve. That was before.
Wait, he was early.
He had like completely exploded.
Yeah. Which reminds me, I haven't talked to him in a couple of years, so it'd be fun to catch up on what's going on in his world.
For sure.
All right, so everything is remix. You're remixing the remix is somewhere I saw. That's what you mentioned, and everything is a conspiracy. Or sorry, everything is a conspiracy theory. Maybe that's the next one. This is not a conspiracy theory. Just I mean the level of detail that you put into all these things, and from every aspect of it, the story that you're telling, or the stories that are embedded inside them, the production quality is just I don't know how you do it. It's I mean, clearly you've been doing it for quite a while, but it's kind of mind-boggling.
That's awesome. It takes a lot of work. It takes too much work. It's not
cool, man.
It's not economic.
Yes, well, but it's his own reward, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't. Yeah, I do it because I have to do it, right? Like that's my
right.
rationale.
Yeah, no, it's good stuff, and I'm definitely, I bought. This is not a conspiracy theory, so I'm going to be watching that on my own. And as it turns out, both my daughters are taking sociology classes right now. That this is probably a ripe topic to watch with them, and the remix stuff as well, which would be fun because then we can flash back through different musical genres among other things and see where we have interesting overlap. All right, man. So thank you so much for. I'm glad we had a chance to chat. I'd love to catch up sometime in the future about where you've taken everything as a remix.
Sure.
And. Yeah, I mean, I think there's tons and tons that we could have talked about.
Yes.
So I'm just glad that we had a chance to talk today.
Awesome. Yeah, happy to chat again. It was a real pleasure, Dan. I had fun.
Okay, awesome.
All
Thanks,
right.
Kirby.
Take it easy, man. See ya.